These are women with lived experience of substance use and pregnancy, and they're going to tell us what clinicians are doing right, and I think, as a clinician, far more importantly, what we're doing wrong. So, over here in the blue is Ria Tsinas. She is on the Perinatal Substance Use Work Group. She's the chair of the Family Toolkit. She has been working in harm reduction and supportive housing for almost a decade. Fun fact, before that, she was an archaeologist. She just became one because she felt like it. She didn't go to school. She was supervising digs in the American Southwest just because she felt like it, and so she was the boss, and that is what happened. She has a beautiful daughter named Lola, who was exposed to substances in utero and is now healthy and happy and gorgeous. Sitting next to her is Telia. She is a peer support mentor. She's a doula from a program in Portland, Oregon. She also has lived experience of perinatal substance use. And all the way down at the end there is Casey. She's from the same program as Telia. Also the same credentials. She's a doula. She's a trauma-informed care peer mentor for pregnant and parenting people. And we're so privileged to have them here today. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. So as Joel said, my name's Ria. I'm currently living in Eugene, but I'm starting school, going to PSU, studying public health in Portland in like 2 weeks. So a little bit about me. My whole entire life, I've had a relationship with drugs or alcohol, and alcohol, which is a drug, in one way or another. Sometimes it was really chaotic, sometimes it was manageable. I came into the world of harm reduction when I moved to Seattle, Washington, and started volunteering at a syringe exchange. And it really changed my entire perspective on what I had come to understand about myself and the narrative that had been given to me, which is that I was a bad person and that I couldn't remain abstinent or get my life together because I was morally incapable of doing so. I'm going to stand up. I don't like sitting here. So I was told that basically the narrative is that it wasn't the clinicians and the rehabs and the judges and all of the institutions that I had interfaced with that were the problem. It was me. And when I came into harm reduction, I recognized that, wow, there's like a totally different way. There's a totally different way of looking at myself, of being loved unconditionally, and of being able to be of service and use the talents that I have to create impact in community. And through that was really a transformational experience for me. It's not to say that I didn't continue using drugs, because I did. But I also, started a career in public health, and I did all kinds of really cool stuff while I was using drugs. So on to my pregnancy, because that's why we're here. I was planning my pregnancy. I was really, really excited. My partner and I were super, super excited to have a baby. When I found out that I was pregnant, right away I was abstinent. At the time, I was a pretty heavy crack user. So yes, crack users come in all different shapes and colors and sizes. And I had we found out that I was pregnant, and I stopped using. And about right towards the end of my first trimester, I ended up, my father died, and that was a real huge source of trauma for me because as a child, I had suffered some pretty significant physical and sexual abuse. And so when he died, I kind of didn't know how to deal with that. My partner was also really struggling with remaining abstinent, and having a person around that's using drugs when you're trying not to is really hard. Flash forward, I was diagnosed with incompetent cervix. I was over 35, so man, I'm old, right, at the time, to have a baby. There's a lot of details. I'm just trying to cut it down so that we can have a conversation about what I really want to talk about. My water broke at 23 weeks. I was put on hospital bed rest. I was in the middle of a move from Seattle to Eugene because I decided that we needed to have a change of venue in order to sort of get away from the unhealthy circumstances that we were in Seattle. So my water broke while we were moving, so I went to the hospital where I stayed on bed rest, and then when I decided I had to coordinate all of my own care, I had to find my own NICU in Eugene because no one would help me. I was open about my substance use. I was open about the fact that I was using because I knew my rights and I felt like I would be protected. And so I was on bed rest there. I coordinated my care. I told them, the social worker and the doctors and the nurses, that, hey, my partner, I don't have a home here in Seattle. My partner is not safe. I need to go to Eugene where there's a NICU that can take me. When they discharged me, they told me I was leaving AMA. They refused to give me antibiotics. Inevitably, what ended up happening is I delivered by emergency C-section as a result of an infection at 25 weeks. And so that sucked. So we had about a 106-day stay in the NICU. My daughter had sepsis, staph, 3 blood transfusions, and a heart operation. She was born 1 pound 11 ounces. She's going to be 3 in June. She's 3 feet tall, 30 pounds, hit every developmental milestone, and is completely healthy and happy. And I think a lot of that has to do with my privilege. It has a lot to do with the fact that I'm a white, educated person with resources and experience and understanding of how to navigate institutions, which gives me an advantage that a lot of people don't have. So that's the really, really, really revised version of the story. But what I really want to talk about is what was useful, what was helpful for us when we were in the NICU, and what wasn't helpful. What wasn't helpful was people saying things like, oh, you don't look like you use drugs. Or people reporting information incorrectly. I was told I could not breastfeed by a social worker because I was a daily drinker. Well, that's completely ridiculous. If I was a daily drinker, I would have been going through alcohol withdrawal in the hospital while I was on bed rest. Furthermore, what gives a social worker the right to hand down medical information or orders? So that was problematic. So when you're reporting things, make sure you get it right. Kind of important. And if I seem like I'm waving my finger, it's because we are just a subset of people that have to deal with really, really hard stuff, and the choices and the decisions that you all make impact us in a major way. And so that's why let's see. Creating welcoming spaces, not lying to your patients or clients. When I first reached out for help, I tried to check myself into a rehab center in Seattle, and I was terrified. When I arrived, I called the person on the phone. They told me, no, we're not going to take your child, don't worry. When I got there, they were trying to get me to sign all this paperwork. It's a complete contrary. I sat in a hallway for an hour and a half without so much as being greeted by a single person. This is like the scariest time in my life, and I feel terrible because I'm worried about my child and the impacts of my use on my child, and I'm alone, and I have no idea what's going to happen, and I'm ashamed, and the people that are supposed to help me aren't anywhere around. So make sure you're there for your people. All right. Those are some pretty big ones. Making sure, so let's talk about what's helpful, because I'm a positive person. So what's helpful? Including your parents and your clients on everyday cares. Being a team with the people that you're working with in the NICU, the families in the NICU. Lifting them up and giving them unconditional positive regard. Believing in them. Looking at them just like any other parent. Every day when we were in the NICU, it took a lot of time, and they tracked me. Every day I would walk in, and they would write down when I showed up, and they'd write down when I left. And I, again, was in a position of privilege where I was able to come and show up every single day. But some people can't do that. Making sure you're educating parents too. What else was really helpful? Normally I just know this off the top of my head, but for whatever reason, I'm kind of drawing a blank right now. Making sure that parents have available resources and are educated about resources, community resources. So if your families need housing, if they need, do you need to know where diaper banks are, meal vouchers, those were super helpful. Just being able to know if we were going to be able to get something to eat in the cafeteria. Being encouraged to have self-care like that. Granted, most of the patients that you're probably seeing probably don't, or families that you're seeing probably don't have 106-day stays. But even a 7-day stay in an environment like a NICU, 7 days or 106 days, it's pretty scary and overwhelming, and it's hard to want to leave your child, and especially if you're feeling like everyone is watching you and watching every move you make and judging you. It's hard to leave. And it's hard to take care of yourself. So encouraging people to take the time that they need to engage in self-care, whatever that looks like for them. I'm not really sure how much time, where are we in time? We have a long amount. Oh my God. I'd like to do is sort of let everyone tell their stories, and then we can have more of an engaged conversation. Because right now I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. So I'm going to hand it on over to Casey and let you guys get to know her a little bit.
Does it work? Is it working? This is super creepy, you guys. So my name, I don't know if I need it, but my name is Casey. Either way. Okay, so this is like the first time that I've shared my personal story to a group of professionals instead of a group of my peers. That's something that I'm pretty familiar with with my recovery background, is sharing my story, but sharing it to you guys is super intimidating. So if I stutter or need to pause, just bear with me. So my story is also one of privilege. As far as my birth story, I am a woman who was homeless from 13 to 20 in domestic violence relationships, constantly getting arrested for something, and just in a really negative situation. And so when I found myself, let's back a little bit. So at this phase of my life, I was an IV meth and cocaine user. Pretty much through my entire adolescent period, that was kind of part of my story. It's a family disease in my family, and I was exposed to a lot. And that was just my normal, my family's normal, right? So that's a little bit of my truth. So when I was like 19 years old, I'm in this really awful DV relationship with my daughter's father, and we decided that we were going to have a baby and that it was going to make everything okay. And in my mind, I figured he would bail and I would be free, right? Like this would be my freedom. I'd be able to leave. He wouldn't want to be around me and this baby. I'm also one of 6 kids, so I had lots of experience being the oldest of a bunch of kids that needed me, and so that's kind of where I always found my strength, was being needed. So we had this master plan. I was going to get pregnant, and that happened, right? Like I got pregnant. I was still really struggling with my IV drug use of whatever I could get my hands on. And I just kind of decided that, like, because I knew that, like, maybe putting drugs into my bloodstream was not good for my kids. Like, and I knew that was not the woman or the mother that I had ever wanted to be. But I also knew that I couldn't stop, no matter how bad what I was doing, or no matter how negative all the research said my drug use was going to be to my fetus, and I just couldn't stop. So fast forward a few months, I decided that I'm going to turn myself in, right? I'm talking about it, I'm telling everybody I'm just going to turn myself in because I had warrants. And I couldn't do it. I could not turn myself in, but I had done a ton of research and there was no program for me. My option was I could open a voluntary DHS case on myself, and my siblings had been taken away over and over and over, and I knew what that system looked like, and I knew how it did not serve my family, and I could not do that either. I could not do that either because it was terrifying. But what did end up happening was my child's father, so kind, decided that we were going to go, and we were going to go do this one more deal to get some money before we turned ourselves in. And it was a big transaction and pretty horrifying for me because I did not want to go to prison, but I was looking at prison time. But on the bus, I decided to stand up for myself and tell him that we didn't need to do that we just needed to keep going towards Washington County to turn ourselves in. And like, or just let me go. You know what I mean? Just let me go. Like, you can drop me off to make sure that's where I go. I'm not going to cheat on you or something crazy. He wasn't having that. So he decided to put hands on me on this bus. And honestly, that's the best thing that could have happened because for some reason I had this newfound courage. And I said to him really loudly that if you don't stop, that guy over there is going to get off this bus and he's going to call the police and we're going to go to jail. And he didn't stop, and he told me that I was full of shit and all sorts of other things. And sure enough, that guy got off the bus and he went and called the police. And the police tried to let me go. That's like my universe, right? Like my God, my whatever. Like they decided that they weren't even going to run my name because I was clearly in a shitty situation. They knew me by first name, no big deal. So I was walking away like super slow because I still could not turn myself in. I could not take accountability. I could not make that change because it was so terrifying to live a different way. And eventually, like there's some weaker guy over here like yelling at me across the street from a trap house, like trying to get me to cross the street and just like run because they're not going to arrest me. And eventually they said, Miss Edwards, actually, can you just come back here for 1 minute? And that was like my experience with trying to get fucking help. Right, we have a couple programs now. I don't know about the rest of the United States. I know that they're sparse. But we've got like the capacity to serve maybe 60 women across 3 programs in Portland, and that's it. And we're a referral-based program. So I just, that's kind of like my experience with trying to find any kind of assistance, right? Like I didn't have insurance. This was before Obamacare and all of those little things, and that's kind of my experience trying to get help. Now, once I got into the criminal justice system, where I'm very familiar with how that system works, that is not, they said, hey, Casey, you're pregnant. I'm like, I know. So they automatically put me in solitary because I'm known to be a harm to myself and or others. They automatically put me on a weight gain diet because I couldn't possibly be able to sustain my baby at 140 pounds. So I wasn't super small for some reason. I've gotten smaller. So I'm automatically on this high carb weight gain diet in jail, getting jail prenatal care. And instead of sending me to prison because that's more expensive, they decide that they're going to give me an opportunity to go to treatment in a restitution center across the street, which I asked for. I asked for that. And the same thing happened. They referred me to a prenatal care clinic that, because I was young, I'm 19, or at this time I'm 19, they basically told me, this is what you're going to do. You're going to get an epidural. You're going to take these vitamins. You're going to do these immunizations. Like, and you're going to labor on your back. Like, all of these things, right? They didn't tell me that I had choices. They didn't tell me there was any other way. And I don't come from a socioeconomic that knew those things existed either, right? My mom showed up. My mom's like, yeah, this is what you're going to do. You know, I was blessed to be able to somehow manage to graduate that treatment program, wasn't allowed to take naps, wasn't allowed to sit on my bunk at any point between 5 a.m. and 10 p.m. I wasn't allowed to do any of the things that pregnant women should be able to do in their last trimester of pregnancy. But they really were so considerate in releasing me right before my due date. Because then they didn't have to be responsible for my shelter, they didn't have to be responsible for my birth costs, they didn't have to be responsible for any of that. Once again, I'm a person of privilege. My mom has her shit together. And for the first time since I was like 14, she let me come home because I had this baby, right? Like her grandchild. And so my experience isn't super reminiscent of the women that I get to serve today because they're struggling on their own. They don't have family support, they don't have safe people, they don't have shelter, they don't have anyone willing to pick them up. And they don't have a place that they can escape to, right, to like force them to be clean enough to keep their babies, right? And I had all of those things. But the women that I serve today have access to education, they have access to birth education, they have access to doula services, which I think is really freaking important. Because if I had had someone that said, you don't have to do things this way, I would have an experience that I would like to remember. But instead I have one where I ended up with 15 stitches and almost 10-pound baby, 9 pounds, 15 ounces. I ended up gaining 130 pounds that pregnancy thanks to that lovely starch-based diet. And that's been a struggle for the last 10 years, right? Like overcoming that stuff. I still have struggles with what happened to me during that birth. I still have struggles with my body. I still have fears about the next time I decide to get pregnant, what's going to happen. Am I going to be able to deliver vaginally after the way that they cut me? Am I going to be able to do all of these things? I don't know, right? But the women that I serve today seem to really benefit from having a friend, right? We're not supposed to call ourselves friends as peer support specialists, but that's what we fucking are. Excuse my language. We're their friends. We're people that are there to stand up for them and to support them, do whatever it is that they're doing. And they get the opportunity to have a TOLAC or a VBAC. They get the opportunity to have someone fight for them with DHS or to stand up for them and to show what they're actually doing. And I think that that's the biggest thing that as providers we can do, right? Because I'm technically like a provider now. Is we can stand up for these women and let them know that these are your choices and you're not a piece of shit. Like you deserve so much better. The women that we serve need someone to tell them that because they are beating themselves up. They don't need anybody else to tell them that they've done something to their child or that they potentially caused X, Y, and Z. They don't need to know that. Like you can say like, as a result of this, like this might have happened after their baby's born just so that they're educated, but we don't need to remind them what they're used to doing to their kids. If someone's gonna do that, like it should probably be someone in a peer relationship, not somebody in a position of power over them. Because I can be like, hey man, like maybe we should try to reduce your use in this department, like maybe we can do these other things. And if they're super curious, we talk about like, well this is what like can happen with your IV meth use. You know what I mean? And that gives them an empowering opportunity to think about it, but not to be being put down by the system that's put them down their entire fucking life. I swear to God. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm talking to you guys like I talk to my girls, man. It's a little bit different. There's just so much that we can do to treat people like people that I think that we forget to do when we're worried about their fetus. You know, because that's the biggest thing. Everyone's worried about that baby. She's already done one. Well, now I'm a little bit more intimidated. potentially causing harm, like maybe even not, but what we think and believe we put on them. And especially the people that I work with that come from a super privileged background, right? Like I work on a team of doctors over in Providence in Portland, and they don't know anything about what it's like to be a person who uses drugs, or what it's like to be powerless all the time. And I think that the most important thing that I've seen them do and been able to support them in doing is just keeping space for those women. Like, I don't know, man, I have a couple doctors on my team that will call me at 2 a.m. because they're at the hospital, they don't know what time it is, and just like ask me a random question about like injecting Suboxone. Or what's this feel like? What's that feel like? Like remaining teachable so that they understand what the women that we serve are experiencing, or even have a comprehension of the things that they're talking about. And I think that that whole remaining teachable thing is kind of like the first step towards learning how to work with this population. If you guys don't have any idea what our world looks like and feels like, and the trauma that we experience on a day-to-day basis just trying to survive, like, learn about that. Like, ask us. Like, ask me. Like, I will answer so many awkward questions. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I will answer those questions. If you don't know what it looks like for a woman to try and escape sex work, or trying to escape a domestic violence situation, aside from what you read or saw in a Lifetime movie, please ask someone. Because the personal experience is so much different than what the media depicts, and if you don't comprehend it, you won't be able to serve us. I'm just going to keep rambling if I hold this microphone any longer, so I'm going to stop because I can just do this all day. Yeah.
I was sitting here thinking the whole time, I'm not going to cuss. Casey already broke that up for me. Because I get really flippant with it too, especially when I'm talking about the work that I do. My name is Talia. I work for the same program at a different site, Legacy, Emmanuel. There's 3 sites. I'll just sum it up. It's OHSU, CODA, that has a site, and then there is Legacy, Emmanuel, who has a site, and then Providence, Portland, who has a site, and they kind of were started in that order as well. OHSU started before us, and then down the line came Providence. I am always nervous, always. So if I stutter or I look like I might be ready to crawl out of my skin, that could be possible. But so I come from a different lens, of course. I'm a little bit darker than these ladies. I come from the lens of being a child of 2 addicts. So my father was a heroin addict. My mother was an up and downer, all arounder addict. If you don't know what that means she did pretty much anything that anybody would put in front of her. It is always like the family. So if you're African American, you understand that a lot of times we live by the creed of don't talk about what happens in this family. So I knew that I was a baby that was born withdrawing because of how I was treated by systems and my family. It's like that. That's the addict's baby, or that's the junkie's baby. Junkie was used a lot in my family. So I grew up knowing that something was different about me, and not really knowing how to take that. So I watched my mom struggle with addiction and mental health most of my childhood life. I was parentified at a very young age. I was emancipated as an adult when I was 15. I had, needless to say, my life being left in dope houses, being raped and abused from the age of 5 to 12. So I am definitely a survivor. I watched my mom struggle with addiction most of my life. I lived here and there and everywhere. And I used to always say to myself, I'm never gonna use. I think the most humbling thing for me was when I was 13 and my mom tried that geographical thing and she moved to Oregon. And it was just her and I. I'm her only child. And walking in the bathroom and watching my mom try to find things on the floor. And I was like, what the hell? What is this? I never want to look like this. So to me, when I was that young, I would always say, I'm not going to be an addict. I'm not going to use. But some things happened in my world. I was 15 when I had my first son. By the time I was 18, I was pregnant with my second son, and I was in an extremely violent relationship. The guy that I was with tried at least 2 occasions to take my life. He stabbed me, he beat me, he did a lot of things, but when I finally got away, guess what? You know, the tools that I had seen most of my life. My grandmother sat at the table and drank Beefeater's gin. She raised me mostly. And so I was like, now that I'm stressed out, qualified stressed out to me at the age of 18, I was like, drugs will be really nice. They'll fix everything. So that's when my journey with addiction started. I was 18 years old. One thing that I kept saying to myself, because I knew I was a product of that, is that I would never use on my kids. I would get clean for a second, long enough to have a baby, and then I would be back. My oldest daughter was exposed to PCP. I was pregnant with her for 3 months before I realized it because I still had a period. Didn't know that could happen. When I discovered being pregnant with my daughter, I stopped the use of PCP, but I continued after I had her. Actually, I continued to use alcohol. Not throughout my whole pregnancy, but during the end when it got really overwhelming, I continued to use alcohol until I delivered. No one really, I was born and raised Midwest, I think I forgot that, Kansas City, born and raised. They didn't really do drug testing or anything like that. It's a country town. I guess that was normal to have a drink. I don't know. But I know that they didn't ever do anything like that. So I didn't experience the social work experience. I didn't experience the stigma. But what I will tell you is when I started to experience the stigma was, I will fast forward a little. Needless to say, drug use, and of course, I think maybe some of us can relate. I always felt like I would be a drug lord or something one day, so I would sell as many drugs as I could, and I would not identify as an addict. That was my story. But the truth of the matter is I was a fucking junkie. And I had a bout where I went to prison. I was in prison for 2 years. Oregon has this beautiful thing called Measure 11. And I was almost in that category, but for whatever reason, I was granted grace by the judge, and I only served 2 years. By the time I made it out of prison, my kids, needless to say, had changed a lot, and they had suffered a lot. They were left with my mom. And so, when I got back to my kids, I continued to try to stay clean. I had 5 years of sobriety, and I had teenage boys. And I didn't know how to deal with that. I had teenage boys who were sneaking out and sneaking girls in and talking crazy. And my oldest son was probably a couple of feet taller than me. And he would always be like, I can do whatever I want to do. I retreated to the drugs again. But the sad part is, and I struggle with this because I used with my kids. I used with them for the next 5 years. I watched my kids struggle with things I never wanted to see them struggle with. I was total, I watched one of my daughters go through sexual assault, and because I didn't deal with mine yet, I couldn't help her deal with hers. I had a child that did not quite know her sexual identity yet, and because I was Christian-based, we didn't believe in that. I totally shamed her before, but luckily, I always jokingly say that children pick us. Luckily that we don't get to pick them, because I think we would pick the perfect cookie cutter, what we think. But my children picked me. And so my daughter at that time was 12 years old and discovering her sexual identity, and she really didn't give a shit how I felt. And so, and I love her for that still today. She was 12 years old when she finally came out. And she was like, and if you don't like me, I can move out. And I'm like, you're 12. You're 12. But we can work it out. You know, I love my kid. It made me have a newfound love for her. What was the breaking point was my children caught a case. I don't think that it's, I could say an elephant in the room, but I'd be lying. Like discrimination towards people of color with police is real. And so these police officers who knew that I was using with my kids and kind of used that against us, we gave him ammunition. He would harass my children daily. And finally my kids had had enough and they fought back and they caught a case. And so I'm sitting in front of a judge. By then, my disease, I identified with my addiction as a disease, had progressed to opiates. I was using Dilaudid or Percocet, Vicodin, whatever you could give me. And so I found myself sitting in juvenile court with 3 of my teens. One was 20 by then, my oldest son, my youngest son, and my 2 girls who were 15 and 13, and they were facing a Measure 11. Needless to say,
can you identify what Measure 11 is?
Measure 11 is a law where if you, as a person-to-person crime, you can do 6 years mandatory time. And so my teenagers at that time were going to get tried as an adult and be facing a Measure 11 crime. Needless to say, that brought up some stuff for me. It reminded me that me not seeking help and healing, this cycle would continue and continue. What I will say is that the judge said to me, and I think I woke up just for a second, and sometimes that moment of clarity, you think, why can I just not hear that? But I heard what I needed to hear. The judge said, you're raising your children like monsters, and I'm going to spread you guys out. She was like, I'm going to put your 2 daughters, because they had caused the most damage, in prison, and I'm going to send your son to prison for a while, and you guys will not see each other for a very long time. My kids looked at me with all lost hope. They were tired of me using. I kept saying, I'm going to quit. Just one more. I'm going to quit. Just one more. And this was a reality check for all of us. I begged the judge to give me an opportunity to get it together. They put my daughters on house arrest and left them in my care. And I continued to use. Like I cannot tell you that I stopped. I continued to use. What I didn't have is my companions. My kids stopped. They knew that if they kept on, that they would go to prison. In this journey, I have definitely, 9/7/12 was my clean day. I will have 6 years of sobriety this year, September. So, that is what my story looked like. If I could tell you that my kids stayed clean, I'd be lying. My kids still struggle with addiction. And, you know, the only thing that I can do, I have this thing in my recovery support we call living amends. I get to continue to live clean and sober no matter what, and hopefully be the beacon that they need for me to be at some point in their life, and not continue to show them how to stay sick. With that, my navigating the healthcare system is after recovery. I think that trying to fight for recovery, I am really grateful for my primary care provider. She didn't quite know what clean and sober looked like. She just knew that I kept testing positive for marijuana and opiates that she wasn't giving me. And she kept saying, Talia, are you taking pills? And I was like, no. She was like, okay, we're going to try this again. And she just kept saying, what do you need? I think that that's what I say to my peers now, my clients now. What do you need? What do you need? that was like the biggest thing, like giving me my power back. Not telling me what I needed to do or not treating me like that monster in court. And she kept saying, Talia, what do you need? What do you need from me? What do you need me to do? And I kept saying, just help me get, so I became addicted to opiates because I have arthritis in both of my knees. And I kept saying, I don't want to feel the pain. The truth of the matter is, opiates don't take away the pain. They just give you a great nod while you're going through the pain. That was my experience. So I kept saying, I need pain management. I don't know what that looks like. I just know that I need a different route to get rid of the pain, because pain is a trigger for me. That's something that you may not realize, but a lot of times for our clients, pain can be a trigger. That's in birth, in any type of thing. I always ask a person that I'm supporting in birth if pain is a trigger for them, because that's true. That's very true. It's not an excuse. It's, I don't want to feel this, and I'm willing to do anything not to feel this. And that means emotional pain too, not just physical pain. So she directed me a lot of ways: acupressure, acupuncture. I went a lot of different routes. My sweet spot is I've controlled my pain with the way that I eat. I changed the way that I eat, and that took years but it took a lot of support from her. I need to say that was the most pivotal and most supporting person on my team. And I use a lot of the skills that she taught me through that process with the ladies that I support. So I'll go on to say what helps. What helps me, I think, is what helps me in that process, and what I've seen help the women that I serve is giving them their power back. What we don't realize is that we deal with a lot of women that have been stripped from their power for many different reasons, whether it be sexual assault, domestic violence. Those are scars that stay for a very long time. And we hear messages that no one else tells us. You might be saying, well, I think you should try, and they still hear the message, I don't really mean a lot to you. You're just trying to mark off a box, or you're just trying to get something done. And so you're just trying to get me out the way. That's what we hear when we're being rushed through a process. You need to have this, this, and this done. Well, instead of saying, what would you like to do first? Or what will help you get through this process? I think that is what, I always get feedback from my ladies. That's another thing, is hearing them out. Being able to hear them out and ask them what was most helpful. What would you change? And being open to that. Being open to feedback as a provider, yes, that actually works. I could take constructive criticism from one of my clients a lot faster, I think, than from one of my colleagues. Because it matters. Like, one thing we always talk about at our meetings is the ripple effect. Healing that mother helps her become a productive member of society. Guess what? She's not out snatching purses. She's not out robbing the store. It's a ripple effect when you help that one person. And so I always have to keep that in mind. I think about myself often. I was not a cool person. People are safer now that I'm clean and sober. And I have to think about that with my moms, with the moms and the people that I support. They may be in a domestic violence relationship. Guess what? That guy that a lot of social workers might find out because he's bashing our head in, he probably has some issues that need to be dealt with as well. We forget about the dads. I'm a total advocate for the dads. I always see a side of a father, and I think that's the hardest for providers, especially the providers I work with. I'm always I'm a doula, okay? I'm at a birth, and I don't care what his history says. If he's trying to show up for a mom that is pregnant and in labor, I'm supporting him as well. So I get close to him as well, and I try to teach him how to be more supportive. And so that is big and pivotal too, because by him being aware of what's going on, sometimes he starts to seek healing for himself. That makes healthier families. And so I always keep all of that in mind. It's a full circle. It's a full circle when you're helping a family. And a lot of times you have family members that show up to birth, and they clearly have addiction, and there's things going on, but I always work the room like nothing is wrong. I don't have time to sit there and say, oh my gosh, she's digging in her birth for like 30 minutes. No, there's a mom in labor. I need to support this mom, and as long as I've literally been in the birth, the baby comes out, and the grandmother's like over here doing something weird. I go over, grab her hands, and say, it's a baby here. You know, like bring her into that space. And so by doing that, that brings a lot of awareness and healing. I always say, and I know I could chat for a very long time, especially about this work because I love it. I always say, just pay attention to the atmosphere that you're in. Sometimes when you go into a room and a person is really angry, please pay attention to the way that they're responding, because anger doesn't always equal I'm pissed off at you. I might be a little mad at myself because I can't stop. I'm hurting because I don't understand why I can't stop. I'm hurting because I'm holding this baby that I've just caused damage to. I'm hurting because I have some sexual trauma that people keep overlooking. A lot of times, us as women that have gone through sexual trauma, we wonder why no one has asked or cared throughout our entire process. And so sometimes just asking them, are you okay? Is there something I can do for you? What would you like? Like giving them the power back. We as women are very powerful beings. You can push your baby out. Even if you haven't pushed the baby out, we've survived some things that most people can't survive, but if you push the baby out, you're pretty powerful. And I'm not taking it away from those that haven't. I'm just saying, it takes a lot for a woman to be a woman. Whether you are brown, yellow, white, whatever you identify as, it takes a lot to be a woman. To show up for our family. A lot of us are caretakers. We may not have a husband, but we have siblings or someone that we're taking care of already, and we are neglecting ourselves. And so when you enter a room with a mom that's struggling with addiction, keep that in mind. Because a lot of times we wear this cloak and we protect ourselves, but it comes oozing out after a while. And we don't know how to deal with it. And sometimes trauma or events happen that trigger that response. You get a social worker asking you, so when was the last time you used, and you're like, what the hell are you talking, do you know what I've been through? And you're asking me what I used? That's your primary focus? You gotta be kidding me. I think that the biggest thing is, I speak to my colleagues about, is overlooking things in the chart. I know we all have a heavy caseload. I know we all can excuse ourselves, but if you can read a book, you can read a chart. If you can sit up and dig through a person's personal history and look for the bad, you can dig through there and see the good. You can see where they've struggled or tried or been through trauma, or if they lost a parent, or if you can see the mishaps too. Just like you can see meth use, or cocaine use. I'll end with this story. I have a good friend in recovery. This is just a prime example of how things can get overlooked. I have a good friend in recovery. She has 14 years clean and sober. She's getting ready to get some type of surgery, I don't know. She's older. She went in to have her evaluation for the surgery. She has 14 years clean and sober. Her physician said, I see you struggle with alcohol. What do you think is wrong with that? She said, you mean I used to struggle with alcohol like 14 years ago? That alone will make someone get up and walk out of your office and never speak to you again. That alone will make someone, because here's the deal, we do have rights. A lot of us don't realize it. We can file a grievance. We can change positions. A lot of us stay because we're scared. But I push. I tell my clients all the time, you have rights. Speak up. Say something. If you feel like something would, just be able to put it in words where you don't sound like a crazy maniac. Because if you come looking like one, they'll treat you like one. They'll use that ammunition against you. But be sure that you put your words together in an eloquent manner, because that's the only way they may hear you. Say what you need to say. Back up from that situation and evaluate it and put out what hurt, what did not help you. And I think that that's something that needs to be echoed a lot. As much time as you take to look for the bad, look for the good. Look through a chart slowly, pay attention, ask questions. Because we would do that if it was one of our family members. And I know that I'm not speaking for myself. Everyone in this room has been touched by addiction. Everyone. Every single person in this room. That's a reality.
So, does anyone have any questions or comments or? Erica?
Well, and again, it's like every time I get to listen to people talk about it, it's like new things occur to me. It's like, especially to Leah, when you brought up like the primary healthcare provider, and also the idea, I think, Casey, you brought up the idea that we're a whole person. We're not just you can't just care about us for this time that we're pregnant with a baby inside of us, and about how much healthcare doesn't revolve around that. So, I mean, do you feel as if, what can people do better about paying attention to your health and well-being and not seeing everything through the lens of either you've got a baby in you right now, or you could, or that through the lens of, your substance use? How can I just healthcare with, I mean, are those things even relevant sometimes?
So, I don't know, I kind of hate the ASAM, but the ASAM assessment or whatever likes to touch on, I think it's like 5 components of health. Do I need to?
Yes.
It feels so loud. So it's like wants to focus on what's your environmental situation look like? What's your environmental health? What's the world around you look like? What's your social health look like? What's your, all of the different components, right? Physical, emotional, all of that. And I think that as providers, I know that we don't have a ton of time, especially those of you who are maybe primary care physicians or OBs or any of that, but really I think that in order to determine what's happening with someone and what they may need, what kind of support they may need, we need to look at what's going on in their world, right? So you can ask someone what do you need, but unless you're not asking them what's their environment look like, or how do they feel at home, or how do they feel within their familial relationships. If you ask me, what do I need? I'm gonna be I need Dilaudid. Or what, you know what I mean? But if you ask me, what's my environment look like? How could we make that better? How can we improve these situations? It gives people an opportunity to improve their outcomes, whether they're using still or not. I think that looking at what they can do to improve their overall quality of life is generally going to reduce use. I don't know if that answered your question. No.
And I want to add on to that too. I always kind of evaluate moms when they come into the clinic and see if they are homeless and they have other health issues that, like missing teeth or need glasses, or I always kind of put it into the priority for them on top of the prenatal care. They're already getting the prenatal care, but guess what? I might not show up to prenatal care like I need to if I'm homeless. If I'm living in a tent, trust me, prenatal care is not at the top of my list. So if I hear that from a mom, I always try to make sure we get that. I think that was, I can identify. I was homeless when I got clean. It was really hard to focus on everything else homeless. So I always take that into consideration. And I don't just mark them off because they don't show up to prenatal appointments or they can't quite meet with me as their doula. I've gone to plenty of coffee shops and parks where you need me to show up. But that's just because that's part of mine. But keeping that in mind as well.
I think for me, one of the main components of having a positive outcome so far, because I've only been a mom for less than 3 years, so who knows what can happen from here on out, is that I had stability because of my father's death. I had a life insurance policy that I inherited, and that was pretty much the only way that if I had to struggle to survive, I bet you that it would be much more difficult for me to not have a chaotic relationship with substances, and I probably would have continued using my partner, her dad, committed suicide last year in April. And if I would have had to if I didn't have the supports set in place for me through all of the providers and all of the services that I had interfaced with during my NICU journey and afterwards, like early intervention and the public health nurse that would come and visit me every week, I probably would have not, I wouldn't probably be here right now. And also, the piece people keep talking about is being empowered. You know, getting involved for me in organizations like this, having the ability to sit here and talk to you guys, gives me a reason. It makes me want to be present. Having a platform and being able to engage in advocacy and activism and changing how we treat people is such a motivator for me to maintain and continue pushing forward, because I know that these things aren't just about me. And for me, activism and advocacy is a huge part of what keeps me going. And so empowering people, hope and empowerment can change a person greatly. And believing that everyone has the ability to do that and encouraging them to do so is huge. And it's been a transformational thing in my personal life. And so, yeah, that's something I want to add. Anyone else have any other questions or comments? Sorry.
I have a comment. Did anybody tell you guys are fabulous?
Thank you.
I have a question. So I know, Ms. Leda, you talked about your, how being African American was affecting you and your use. I was wondering if any other cultural or community factors affected, in a positive or negative way, any of your life journeys and any other resources, maybe churches or family or any cultural things that affected and possibly helped define your experience so far.
I would say, I'm loud. I would say the other thing was my recovery support. They were like I would say they were like my backbone, you know, in the process where I really didn't have enough strength to, when I talked about still actively using, when my kids were trying to work through that process of being on house arrest, I have a friend who was my friend, the one I talked about that has 14 years clean. She got me out of the hotel that I was living in and using. And that started my journey to recovery. I'll also say my church family, but I just gotta keep it 100. Church folks don't want to come to your house when you using. They just don't. At least the churches I was associated with. So after I got clean and sober, of course, I found a church home that is supportive of who I am today. But I have to say, like that therapeutic value of one addict helping another, it definitely is without parallel, because there was other addicts that had clean time that helped me.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to reinforce the theme that I'm hearing is you're sitting here listening to three women who are actively engaging with the same population. We are who we're helping, and so that's really amazing and awesome. And so I don't know. I just want to reinforce that, the way that you treat people can be that ripple effect and continue to create revolutions of change. Did you have?
I just want to comment, a lot of times I go to speak with moms. I work in the university, and I go to speak to the moms, and I feel like there's constantly
big part of something I was going to say is we need to know what drugs are. I think one of the most important things you can do is educate yourself, be teachable, and not just on the clinical stuff, but on like the practical stuff. And good for you and everyone else for having a talk about how to use drugs and what they are this afternoon. So stay tuned and definitely show up for that. But yeah, certainly, I think knowing what drugs are at the very minimum is helpful. I don't mean to sound condescending, but even Joelle, who's a colleague of your friend, shared an experience where one of her nurses was, what was it they thought that the person was using? They were giving baby methadone because the baby was methamphetamine exposed.
And I corrected that, and she said, isn't that the same thing?
So, I mean, just basic knowledge about different, and the street words, like black is heroin, is tar heroin. But, I mean, there's geographical differences about what different types of drugs look like in different places. But yeah, I mean, and you know what? You could just ask the person. I mean, if you can build rapport, that's like 95% of all of it is you may not even just respond to the person as a person. Like if they're not really super engaging, there's probably a reason they've probably experienced a lot of institutional trauma. And they're not engaging with you because they're afraid. So offering a cup of coffee and just being like, dude, the weather sucks, or whatever, like just talking about normal stuff that you talk about with your colleagues, and just starting from there and building a relationship that's not centered around their baby or their substance use or their trauma. Because the reality is we all use substances of some variety all of the time, and not every single mom that's walking in off of the street is engaged in survival sex work or domestic violence or whatever. And fundamentally, they're still experiencing the same level of shame, whether or not they have experienced the awful, the more dark and normalized narratives around substance use. But there's lots of upper white middle class ladies who are doing cocaine, snorting rails on the weekends, and taking handfuls of Oxycontins too. And I guarantee you they feel just as shitty about it. So, yeah. And then I think we'll have to cut after you.
I was just going to ask for any advice in how to approach a woman who you might suspect is using. I take care of pregnant women. And by law where I practice, I can't drug test without their consent. How do I start that conversation where I have suspicions?
What makes you suspicious?
Perhaps behavior, perhaps something in the chart from someone else. Yeah, how do I approach that situation without alienating them? In the context of wanting to try to get them help and, with the right clinician even, who can address someone who's currently using while pregnant.
I personally will suggest being open-minded. I can give you an example of a client who was trying to look for a good physician that wasn't judgmental. So every prenatal, every OB she went to, she would say, I smoke cigarettes. She did way more drugs. But she would tell him, or her, whatever, I smoke cigarettes, to see the response. Because if he's going to freak out over cigarettes, wait a minute. Like when I tell him what I'm really doing. But when she came to us, we were open-minded. And when she said, I smoke cigarettes, she's like, okay, what would you like to do a patch? Are you going to continue to smoke? How do you want to approach this? And that's what made her open up about the rest of the drugs.
One of the things I should say too is, normalizing things. I had prom, but that could have been because I had an incompetent cervix. It had nothing to do with the fact that I was using stimulants during my pregnancy. And one of the things that was really fantastic was that my NICU team normalized my experience. They didn't make it about my drug use. They made it about the fact that I had a medical condition. And so that removed that stigma. So normalizing and asking everybody, if your patients know that every single person is treated the same, they'll probably be a lot more likely to engage with you around it.
Can I
I just add to that? If you're going to test somebody for drugs, then it should be broad testing of everybody. You shouldn't just pick on assumptions because something doesn't feel right. I'm a provider, and if I'm going to screen for drugs, then I have to do a blanket statement for everybody. I'm not just going to pick one person. If I was to pick one person, it would have to be for logical, sound reasoning that I have either documentation or something that they have addressed themselves directly. But if I'm going to screen everybody, somebody has to be broad across, across the whole spectrum.
And we also have the in-girl screening in our clinic, and that's usually how we usually figure out who, we should even be having this talk with.
I bet if you screened everybody that you're providing OB care for, you'd be super surprised. I would like you to do that.
Well, that's our time. We thank you so much for coming and listening and being open. And we really look forward to engaging more with you at the conference. And there'll be more talks just like this, so stay tuned. Thank you.